Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show on this January the 17th, 2023, a Tuesday. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad to have you guys here. Now, I got a lot to cover in this show. One of the things I'm going to be talking about is I'm going to be talking about different kinds of nuclear warfare. A lot of people, they think in terms of going to be a nuclear war, they think end of the world. Not necessarily. And also, we're going to move on. We're going to talk about David Morgan. Very respected financial. I have a lot of respect for this man. He is generally been on top of things, and especially the silver market for many years. I've followed him. And now he's talking on Stansberry Research here to Daniela Cabone about what the banks might do in the very near future. And I think he's right on the money, because they've passed laws into effect that they've changed things. You used to be a depositor in the bank and they held your money for you. Things have changed. The laws have changed surrounding money, what we call money, which is actually debt. The way it's written now, you are what's called an unsecured creditor to the bank, and the bank actually owns your money and they can do what they want with your money. And I know people find that hard to believe. They think, oh, that's my money in the bank. Well, years ago, they did a test case, the banks did, in a place called Cyprus. And they did what was called a bail-in. Now, they've already said, that if the time's coming in the very near future, if we have another banking financial crisis, the banks are not going to get bailed out. Instead, they're going to bail in. And you say, well, what does that mean? What it means they're just going to take a certain amount of your money. Chop. And they can do that. You don't know they can do that, but they can do that. They can say, oh, guess what, guys? We're going to take, say, 30% of your money. It's called a haircut. So, say you got $100,000 in that bank. Suddenly you only got $70,000. They just stole $30,000. If inflation wasn't bad enough, guys, inflation's robbing you blind. Now we got this thing called a haircut that the banks can do, and legally they can do this to you if they get in trouble. And this has been around for a while, but some of you guys out there in my audience right now, this is the first you've ever heard of this. So I'm going to put a link in the description to this show, and listen to what David Morgan's got to say about this, because he might be right on the money, and we might be heading very, very close to a banking crisis because of what the Federal Reserve has been doing over the last 6 months or so. Is going to come to an abrupt end. Especially if you guys watched my show that I produced over on Patreon yesterday, that gave you the reasons why I'm very concerned and why I did my show yesterday here on YouTube. And how the financial system could suddenly falter and fall into almost like what happened during the Great Depression, with markets tumbling. And then the Fed would have to come to the rescue of the markets. But will they rescue the banks this time, or the banks have to rescue themselves through a bail-in? So that's an interesting question. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is I want to talk a little bit about nuclear warfare. This is called a strategic nuclear weapon. A strategic nuclear weapon refers to nuclear weapons that are designed to be used on targets, often in settled territories, far from the battlefield. Okay, so in other words, when we think of nuclear war, this is what you always are thinking of, as strategic nuclear weapons being used, blowing the earth up. And in fact, these strategic nuclear weapons do have the capability to blow up cities and everything else and devastate the earth. But there's also a different kind of nuclear weapon out there you guys might not be familiar with, and this is the tactical nuclear weapon. Tactical nuclear weapons are also called non-strategic nuclear weapons, a nuclear weapon designed to be used on the battlefield in military situations. They're much smaller, these tactical nuclear weapons, and they're designed to be used mostly on battlefields against soldiers, not against cities and stuff. So what you don't realize is, and what most people don't realize is, a nuclear war, they think of, oh, termination of mankind. It's the end. It's the whole world blowing up in a nuclear conflagration. That's strategic nuclear weapons if they're used. But these tactical nuclear weapons could also be used, and in a very limited way, between the nations. And this makes it so nuclear war is not just one entity. It's not just one thing. It's not just the world blowing up. It's also, it could be used in a limited way on battlefields. But the problem with this is, if they start using tactical nuclear weapons on battlefields, then we're very, very close to the strategic nuclear weapons being used. That's just the next step. So this is like a stair step where the world could be walking toward, blindly walking slowly toward some sort of a nuclear war. But that nuclear war is divided into two parts, tactical and strategic. And just because these parts are totally separate from one another, just because one happens doesn't mean the other one has to. Generally accepted that it very possibly could fall into both happening at the same time, but it doesn't necessarily have to. And so that's why we have to divide the nuclear war idea in our mind into two parts, tactical and strategic. Tactical would always come first. It doesn't necessarily mean that strategic would happen, because we've already had nuclear war. You're saying, what, Glenn? What the hell are you talking about? We haven't had a nuclear war. Yes, we've had World War and we've had a nuclear war. We've already had it. Way back when Japan was bombed with nuclear weapons. Now, these were the early versions of the strategic nuclear weapons, but in a way, it was used in a tactical nuclear setting. This could happen again. History repeats itself sometimes. It doesn't necessarily mean the end of the world, but it could mean the end of a certain battlefield situations or whatever. But here's one thing I want to point out very clearly about all this, is the people of the earth have been trained. They think only strategic in nuclear war. And so if tactical nuclear weapons are used, they also create a mushroom cloud. And the people out there would have a reaction, a fearful reaction around the entire world if we start to see mushroom clouds. It doesn't matter if it's tactical or strategic. The effect it would have on the people is one of the things that I'm thinking about and I'm concerned about, is this fear reaction. And I've talked about this on several other of my shows, where we could get what I call a human stampede, where if you, after all, we have similarities. We have similarities as a species to the animals. And if you watch like a herd of cattle on a field, on a plain, say out in the plains or whatever, and say there's a thunderstorm comes up and a big clap of lightning, and all the clouds start to go in one direction, it's called a stampede, because they're all frightened. And that fear is a tremendous motivating force. Humanity is the same way, and we've been trained all of our lives to tremendous fear about nuclear war, because we've been told this is the end. You're going to die. If there's a nuclear war, everybody's going to die. Blah, blah, blah. We've been told that. I shouldn't say blah, 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 but it's like that's been impressed upon us, impressed upon our psyche across the entire world. So what happens if there is, just say, for argument's sake, that mushroom clouds start to appear on the earth in one place or another, maybe on a battlefield? Well, the whole world's going to react because they've been trained to react to that. through the information that we've all received, we all believe we're going to die at that point in time. And that's when we could get this reaction amongst mankind that could be overwhelming, driven by fear. It could be like people are getting that way anyway right now. They're getting this feeling inside like we're being squished. And like we need, it's almost like you're suffocating. This is how people in the world feel right now. It feels like you're being squished from every different angle. Your money is not enough to last till the end of the month. Your other people are tell you what you can and cannot say or even think. People are constantly on a state of agitation. We got diseases roaming around the world where we got to do things like we've never done before as a species, do things like ridiculous things. It don't really make sense, but it's like we're being pushed, and pushed. It's almost like if some bully in the schoolyard was pushing some kid, pushing him and pushing him and pushing him and picking on him and picking on him. He might lash out at a certain point in time because he just has had enough. And this is the way with the people on the earth. They're reaching that point now where they feel like lashing out. And you got to be careful. I'm going to tell you. Drivers on the road and stuff, you just honk at them or something, and they can go into a road rage because people are on edge now. Around the entire world, it's this way. So what happens if suddenly the mushroom clouds go off? What could happen is it might be one step too far and it might cause what I call a human stampede. A reaction, a worldwide reaction, almost like a microorganism when you stick a pin in it. What happens to a person if you walk up and you stick a pin? Those cells get ruptured in that one little tiny area on their body, but it puts out a signal to the brain and it gets a reaction. The reaction is a spasm. This is what I'm talking about with a human stampede. It's a massive spasm across mankind caused by generated fear. Don't underestimate the reaction of that and what could stem from that if that were to happen. And that's just one thing. Now, what I want to talk about real quick is something else here. This. Would you believe this? Let me see if I can get a picture over my head there. You see that little thing? It's inside a suitcase. This guy's holding it up. See the suitcase right there? There's another picture. A guy holding it in little suitcases. They're in a little suitcase. Here's another picture over my head right here. Right? Well, I'm watching a show last night about this. During the Cold War, they created hundreds of these things. They just fit inside a small little suitcase or a briefcase. And you know what they are? They're a thermonuclear weapon. It said that they were 1 kiloton size, which is equal to 1,000 tons of TNT. All inside a little tiny briefcase that they can carry around. And I heard last night on the show I was watching that there's 93 of these missing in the world. They don't even know where they're at. Oh my gosh. And we got this crazy war going on. I shouldn't say crazy war, but I mean, stuff going on in the world. And you got these things floating around out there? Look, I guess that's one right there. It's just a tiny little suitcase thing. It's not very big. 93 of them missing? Oh, for God's name, what in the heck? Guys, what a world we live in. This is what they're called. Look over my head there. And you know what damage 1 kiloton can do? Now we're going to talk about the power of 1 kiloton. It's equal to 1,000 tons of TNT. Well, you know what one stick of dynamite can do, and that's only only weighs a few ounces, and you can hold it in your hand. A stick of dynamite. Well, that's called TNT, And can you imagine what a ton of TNT would do? Now picture 1,000 tons of TNT. That's the power of one of these little things. And they say there's 93 of them missing. I think that's what they said, 93 of them missing. What a world. What a world. Let's hope nothing ever happens, because what could 1,000 tons of TNT do in the center of a big city? Well, I'm going to tell you, it would never be the same. The city would never be the same. It would blast the whole center of the city, and it would just be like nobody'd know what hit them. Well, anyway, listen, guys, I'm going to tell you, it doesn't necessarily mean that the world's going to blow up if they use strategic nukes someplace or another. But what it would mean is probably a fear reaction, and it would probably be the point in time where the people would finally tell the politicians what they really think of them. They would stand up, the people would probably stand up during this human stampede and say, hell no, we don't want you doing what you're doing any longer. We want a life for ourselves and our children. That's probably what would happen. Maybe not in that direct way. It might take a form of something that the politicians wouldn't like very much. Let's just put it that way. But the politicians tend to listen when all the people speak up. It happened not just a couple weeks ago, it happened, for crying out loud. We saw they had this zero COVID policy in China. Oh, we're going to crush COVID. We're going to lock everybody up in their apartments, whatever. We're going to stop COVID, right? And then the people stood up. What happened? It was the end of the zero COVID policy. Now, the same thing. We saw it happen in Cyprus. Remember I talked about Cyprus when the banks were going to bail in and going to take everybody's money? So they said to the people all in Cyprus, they said, we're going to take a certain percentage of your money. And the people all stood up in unison and said, no. They shouted no at the banks. And then the bank said, well, we won't take your money. What we'll do is we'll just take the money from the rich people. They say, if you got more than 50,000 euros, we'll take money from you. And we won't touch the smaller people's bank accounts. And then the people, they weren't mad anymore. And when the people get mad, and they finally put their foot down, you know what? The politicians are just like the schoolyard bullies. Have you ever seen it? You got a schoolyard bully and he's going around taking everybody's lunch money and picks on one kid to a time and he's got them all scared. But what happens when all the kids in unison turn against the schoolyard bully? By gosh, he sure does back off then at that point, and he will do anything. He'll beg for mercy. And that's the way with the politicians. They don't know when to stop. But when the people tell them stop, they listen. They know they better listen. And in this case, we're sleepwalking. I say the people aren't sleepwalking toward war. The politicians are sleepwalking toward war. Toward a all-out extermination of all of us if they continue and they don't know when to stop. And if you think they're too smart for that, people look at it like there's an organized mind behind all of the politicians, and they'll never use nuclear weapon, blah blah blah, because they know that it's going to be the end of them and end of their system and end of blah blah blah, they say, and that's why they think they will. But that's looking at the politicians like they're all in one mind, like they're all one individual that can think straight. No, they got all different minds. They're all different, and they all don't think in unison. They're like a scatterbrained person that doesn't have clear thoughts. They have 1,000 thoughts running through their minds at the same time, and that's because there are thousands of there's like 2,000 of them out there who are controlling the world right now. That's 2,000 separate entities, all with different ideas on what we should do with it, and this creates a scatterbrained world. One guy says, well, we should do this, and the next guy says we should do that. and they all got control over the nuclear weapons. You see what danger we're in? And now they've got this thing of this first strike policy, both Russia and the United States together. This was they've adopted this policy. Yeah, I mean, that's with the strategic arsenal, but there's also tactical nuclear arsenal. So it's a very dangerous world we're in right now. And moving on to the markets. So I got to get the markets done too today, and what we're going to talk about is silver price, down 27 cents. Let's see if we get gold on here. Gold is down $3.20 at $19.12. It's soon to go to $3,000. I say soon. I'm not telling you exactly when, but soon. And when it scoots up to that, it's going to do it fast, because it's been this whole thing has just been pushed down for so long. At a certain point, and I'll tell you what I think that point is, and I've said it before. Maybe I should say it again, because you guys probably don't remember the show. I said this, but I said it's when the Fed changes direction. When they have a crisis in the financial system and they have to change direction and they go back to an easy monetary policy, that's when we're going to see gold to go to $3,000 or more. I've heard price 3,600, and I believe it. And what's silver going to do when that happens? Well, it's going to follow gold. The two always go together. That's why they call it silver and gold and silver. Anyway, guys, cryptocurrency's caught a little bid. It's almost up to $1 trillion industry again. It's 21,158 for Bitcoin, and Ethereum is at 1574. Doing rather well. It's starting to pick up a little bit again, picking up its heels. That's good. Congratulations to you guys who might have bought it around 16,000. You got a good bargain on Bitcoin. You've already made 4,000 over the. Anyway, let's take a look at the Dow Jones today. It's down 116 points at 34,300. Take a look at the S&P. The S&P is up it's down 6.75. It's at 4,011 for the S&P. And now we're going to take a look at crude oil. And crude oil is $80.67. So it's cracked the $80 mark for crude oil. It's above $80 again, and it's up 81 cents on the day so far. Bonds and rates today, we're looking at a mixed bag. So we're looking at a 10-year that is at 3.52, and a U.S. 30-year at 3.64. Not much movement today on the bonds. The 30-year is up 1.8 basis points. So, the DXY is at 101.97 on the day. So that's your markets today. You guys know what I'm expecting. Probably sometime spring or summer. I'm expecting the markets to roll over. And if you've watched over at Patreon, you know that why I expect that to happen. What's happening in Eastern Europe that I expect that to happen. Situation, and I heard the elites are all down there at Davos right now. I guess it's Davos. Where do they go? All to sit around the tables, eating their caviar and stuff. I heard someplace that the escort services right there, they're just running ragged. There's just so much work for them, So they're partying big time. All these escapades that they're having. Little what do they call it? A tryst or something. When they go and they they spend all of our tax-paying dollars so that they can have escapades or whatever you want to call it. Anyway, it's very seedy activity. and they spend all of our money on stuff like that. You know, wine, song, caviar, whatever. They just live it. They live in total luxury. They're not even in touch or in contact with the real world. And this is what I told you about this 2,000 or so people out there who are in these positions where they're controlling the world out there, you know, and what a seedy bunch they are, you know, and how they take advantage of all of us. You know, to a point. We get that human stampede I'm talking about. That'd be trouble. Trouble in little paradise, you know, for the elites, you know, out there. But they've been thinking about stuff like this, and they've been saying, well, you know, we're gonna buy our underground bunker this year, you know, and we're also gonna buy a yacht so that we can sail off the coast someplace where the common ordinary people can't even get to us, you know, if there's trouble. You know, they got plans like that, you know, made because they know what I'm talking about. They know that things could get a little bit rough for them at a certain point, especially if they push. They've been pushing for a long time, and they know they've been pushing. They know they've been making out like bandits. Well, we've been all getting poorer and poorer and poorer by the day. They've been getting richer and richer and richer by the day, and they know that at a certain point, people are going to look up and say, You've pickpocketed me through legal means. It's thievery through legal means, legal thievery, legal theft. They've stole your life away from you, and they know there's going to be ramifications for that at some point, you know. But until then, they're gonna have their escorts and they're gonna have their caviar and and whatever else junk that they buy in their fine art and whatever else they can do to really mess you guys up so that you're going to live in poverty. You're going to eat the bugs. Anyway, guys, thank you for listening to my show. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye-bye.